Good morning. Okay, I'll try again. Good morning. Hey. I wouldn't have expected so many people after opportunity to have Belgian beers last night. So I'm really happy for that. But, okay, maybe first start with introducing myself. I'm Wouters. I'm from Belgium, so if the beers are good, thank me. If the beers were bad, it's not up to me, I don't brew the beers. I'm a development manager at eFactor Business Solution, a Belgian VAR and ISV. I also blog sometimes on waldo.be. Not gonna ask who knows that, I did that once, not doing that again. It's quite embarrassing. Enough with the intro. I rehearsed this session yesterday, I needed 3 hours. So I might skip a few things. But I do have another problem. Namely, when I was at Directions, this was actually the first conference of the season, which is actually only 3 months ago or 2 months ago. One of the first sessions about the merge tool, commandlets and things like that, the first session that actually handled Powershell, the first statement that someone from Microsoft did was, watching someone do PowerShell is as boring as watching an old man eat. I still had to do my session. So, I was actually, I took the opportunity and said, okay, I'm going to prove this wrong. So, I took an old man and I went for dinner with him. And I can tell you, watching an old man eat isn't that boring. Or shouldn't be that boring. Shall I just leave this slide on for 5 minutes? And okay. Now, actually, when he didn't want to join me at all, but later he just came up to me and said, "Thank you so much for going to that place." So that was good. Okay. Who of you has never touched PowerShell before? That's about 30–40%. Who of you has used it already extensively? What are you doing here? Okay, who is here because they are sick about RDLC, which is the concurrent session? Okay. What we will see today is, because we have a very mixed audience, and I expected that, we will see the basics. We will get started with PowerShell, place it somewhere in the universe of NAV. We will do some scripting. We will see some scripting, because I prepared a lot of things. And then I promised some people to show something cool, which is running PowerShell in NAV. And if you're here still at 2 hours and 50 minutes, I will show you that. So let's start. Where in the NAV universe are we? Easy, we are in a tooling business. Is someone here in the audience that doesn't know this tool? Because then I would have to ask to leave because this is the wrong conference for you, right? Obviously, we have some tooling. This is the basic tool that we need. This is the Object Designer or Seaside. We have the Report Designer. We have, obviously, Visual Studio. We have this tool. I've been using this a lot in the last few years, which is the Merge tool, right? Someone's applauding here. And we also have the administration console, which we can see as kind of a technical tool. So we have quite a lot of tools, and if we categorize them, I think we can speak of, let's say, development tools, server administration tools. We also have object management tools. Merge tool is actually also an object management tool. I actually forgot to put it down here as well. Strangely enough, those object management tools are not native. They are third party. When you hire a new person and they come from C#, they say, okay, and which is your repository? Well, NAV doesn't have one. Say what? NAV doesn't have one. If we position PowerShell into these categories, PowerShell is actually all over the place. We can do quite a lot with PowerShell. PowerShell, or say it another way, PowerShell can be useful for quite a lot of things in our technical world. So, basically, for who is it? Who can use it? Developers and server administrators. Is there someone here in the audience who is not a developer, has nothing to do with development, or has nothing to do with server administration? No one. So actually, PowerShell is for all of you. Why is it important? Basically, Microsoft says it's important. It's quite funny, but actually, when you think of it, if Microsoft says something is important, we might want to follow that. Microsoft is also putting more and more products on top of PowerShell. So with PowerShell, you will be able to hook into lots of things. Just thinking out loud, we are able to look into NAV with PowerShell, but also look into TFS. So with PowerShell, we could combine those two, which can be quite interesting. Last one, Microsoft certification exams contain PowerShell. We don't do exams anymore, we don't need that. NAV is as simple as it is, so that's actually, I had to remove this from the slide, but I didn't want to. So, I think that kind of covered where we are in the NAV universe, right? Let's get started. First, if we think of PowerShell, we see the word shell, and I do hope you're not thinking about this. Although it has some resemblance, this is quite an old ancient human being, or not a human being, a being. And when you think of a technical shell, that's quite ancient as well. So, PowerShell, what is so powerful about PowerShell then? Well, PowerShell is, how Freddy Christensen from Microsoft calls it, it is DOS on steroids. I find it a very good comparison. PowerShell works with objects, and if you come from C#, if you come from an object-oriented world, that makes a lot of sense. You can work with objects. The things you get back from PowerShell are objects, and you can do stuff with objects, and there are a lot of things in objects. That's how you have to look at PowerShell. Now, if you're going to look at some tools, how can we use PowerShell? Obviously, some kind of shell, some kind of command line, console kind of things where I can type one line, press enter, and it gives me something, right? Small remark, the Windows PowerShell, by default, it accepts shortcuts. We'll come back to that later. The Windows PowerShell ISE is actually the Visual Studio for PowerShell. It's Seaside on steroids. Because it's actually just a basic notepad with IntelliSense. And that's actually, yeah, Seaside on steroids, right? It's a multi-line editing. It's the place where we are going to create our batch files that we know from DOS, which we not call batch files anymore, but we call them PS1 files, which is actually just a scripting file. We can debug, we can, there is some kind of snippet. I'm just going to show you that. So to start PowerShell, that is the all famous PowerShell icon here. And I'm going to sit down. And there are two ways, so two tools that I can start. It's the Windows PowerShell, right, which is just the basic shell thing, and I can just type something and I get something back. We'll come back what I get back, and we'll come back to what I can type. The second tool is the PowerShell ISE, which is obviously, and is also going to be yours, my preference of useful tool. Just because, yeah, you got the IntelliSense, you've got something that is called the command add-on, which can help you in using the commandlets. Like if I'm searching for these, I get these. If I click on it, I get which parameters I can give it and all that. If I just complete these, I can run it straight away or just copy it into my script. This is really useful, right? I have code snippet. I can press Ctrl-J, and I have a code snippet. I say, okay, I want to write a function. This is quite an advanced function, and it's going to, put all this code here already that I just have to complete and put there, right? It can save you a lot of time. That's why I say it looks like C-side, but it's actually much better. I shouldn't say that. It is. Also, quite a nice thing is, okay, I've got that commandlet, but I don't know how to use it. I press F1 on that commandlet and I get the help file. I get some explanations, and this is possible on every commandlet. So, before we start with writing PowerShell, we have to know some fundamentals. As I said, we have the PS1 file, which can be compared as a batch file, right? Just our script. We have commandlets, our comments. Why it's not called comments, I don't know. It's called a commandlet. We have snap-ins. It's actually a DLL that can be put on top of PowerShell and can be used in PowerShell. So, obviously, what Microsoft did is provide us a few DLLs, and now we are able to have, now we have commandlets that are written especially for NAV. Cool. So I can load that into my PowerShell run space, how we call it, and then I can just use it. Piping, pipelining, still don't know what. Piping in Dutch seems wrong, so I tend to use pipelining. This is something that makes PowerShell so powerful. This is the one thing that will save you loads of time. And we'll come back to that later. And there are some formatting features which we'll come back to that as well. So first of all, we have NAV, and we want to use PowerShell for NAV, right? Before we can do that, we have to load the snap-ins, the DLLs that we set. And we do that with these comments. One remark is that you use the PSD1. We'll come back how to find out and why we can use something else as well, and why actually using the PS1 that we get is actually wrong, and can we can have some problems with that, but we'll come back to that. So using or just loading our environment is done in a very easy way. As I said, we have two tools. We have this scripting environment, or this Windows PowerShell, the basic one, and that is provided by Microsoft. So we have the NAV 2015 administration shell, and we have the NAV 2015 development shell. And obviously, when we are going to merge, we use the one. When we are going to do some server administration, we use the other, right? I advise you, when you start the administration shell, do it as an administrator. Sometimes you will not have enough privileges else to do your administration, to create new server instances and things like that. When you do the development shell, it's the other way around, is when you do the development shell, do not do it as an administrator, because when you are spitting out objects and spitting out text files, you will need administrator privileges as well to edit them. So you have to take into account how to start your environment, right? So a way to start, for instance, the administration shell, I just run it as an administrator, and then all my module, my DLL is already loaded into my run space, which means I can start right away. When I'm using the ISE, I cannot use like a commandlet of NAV. You see, even my IntelliSense is not aware of it. So I have to load that into the run space first. I always have some kind of script for that can help me that. I just press F5 and all my commandlets are available, and now I can use the NAV commandlets, right? There is a way to just do this in the ICE, that is change profile. One of my attendees of the workshop told me that. I didn't know that, but there is a way to change the profile of your environment, of your ISE. But that also means that always that you run the ISE, those commandlets will be run, and that's maybe also something that you don't want. So just take that into account. I tend to put these also in my scripts so that I don't forget to load the DLL. So first time you take a look at all the commandlets that we get from Microsoft, this is somehow the impression that you get. So what the hell am I going to do with that? Just a list of what is it? So I tried to categorize them a little bit, and I came up with 4 categories. I think we can talk about server administration and multi-tenancy tools, which just means we can create a new server instance, change it, the configuration, create tenants, setting up an entire multi-tenancy installation, do some provisioning and all that. All the server kind of things. We also have the company management. We can rename companies with PowerShell. We have the upgrade tools, the data upgrade tools. We have security stuff. We can actually set up complete security with PowerShell, starting from permission sets, adding permissions to them, adding users to permissions, adding users to a certain database. And the development part. These were recently added to get and set web services. I like them because else you always needed some kind of tenant that was able to write into your application database. Now you can do it from PowerShell, which actually makes more sense. And we obviously have the merge tools. Who is excited about the merge tools? Everyone. I noticed that I also have my hand up. I'm very excited about it. So, when we're talking about commandlets, we have to talk about syntax as well before we can actually use it. Now, a commandlet always is a verb and a noun. Verb saying, okay, what am I going to do? In this case, I'm going to get something. And the noun saying, okay, what am I going to do? With what? So I want to get service kind of information in this case. And I can provide the parameters. It's obviously dependent of the commandlet. Then it gets me something back, which again is not text, it is an object. An object with methods, an object with properties. I see 3 properties now. That doesn't have to be all of them. And sometimes PowerShell doesn't show all of them. And there are ways to get to your properties another way. But in this case, I'm getting back 2 objects with 3 properties. Before we start typing some PowerShell, let's show a little bit more on the discovery utilities. We have the get command, just find which comments there are. Get help, the get member to find which properties we actually can use on what we get back. And the get variable, which variables are in my run space that I can use in my script. Sometimes also quite useful. So, we're still doing basic things, no scripting, so let me stay in this environment. For instance, if I want to get to know which NAV commandlets are there, I just say, okay, get me all the comments which contains the word NAV, right? Now, I'm actually interested in getting some information from my NAV stuff and something to do with service. I have a few commandlets, which this one is quite an interesting one. get NAVs over server instances. And it seems that I have some server instances installed on my tablet. So if things are running slow, this is just a tablet. Okay, this is cool. But I see, let me look at this. I see, for instance, a NAV2015_MT. Would that be some kind of multi-tenancy environment? Let me find out. What would be the commandlet to use that? I want to see the configuration. So maybe I can just find something like this, and I have a commandlet that get nav server configuration. I just run it. It asks for me a mandatory parameter. So if you forget the mandatory parameter, it will ask you. Well, it's NAV2015MT, and I get back my entire server config. And I see here, for instance, there's a multi-tenant set to true. So now I know it's actually a multi-tenant environment. Cool. So I also saw some kind of get nav tenant. It asked me for, again, server instance. And these are all my tenants on that server instance. So indeed, it is a multi-tenant environment, and I have some tenants. Cool. So maybe we can get companies in a certain tenant. So I have a server instance, NAV2015_MT, and this fails. Oh my God. So now you know how an error looks like. This was intended. Because actually nav tenant, or providing a tenant, is only mandatory at certain occasions. In this case, I have a server instance that actually is multi-tenant, so yeah, then I have to do it slightly another way. I said, okay, get nav companies with the server instance. I'm providing my parameters now, NAV2015_MT, but I also have to provide the tenant. You see that I can just actually type the hyphen and then tab, and it's going to browse me through the parameters. Now I've lost, okay. The tenant, no, there is a tenant called Brummel, and Brummel only has got one company. But we all know that he sells books, right? Who didn't know that my Brummel doesn't sell books? Okay, so there should be some company that does his book selling, like Brummel Books or Brooks or whatever. So let's create a new company. In the tenant Brummel and company Brooks. And I'm actually creating a new company in the tenant Brummel in the service or the server instance NAV2015MT. So let me do this again to get the companies, and indeed Brooks has been created. Congratulations, Marge, you have a new company. So I think taking a look at an environment, I hope the remark that you now have is, dude, that's a lot of typing. And dude, you're right. So let's go into the pipeline. This is, again, one of the most powerful things that also is really typical on PowerShell, that is using the pipeline. And what in C# would be something like this, which is already quite nice as well. The output of this function can be used as an input for this function, and the output of this function can be used as an input of this function, right? We all do that, like that. But how we would do that in PowerShell is like this. So the output of this commandlet, let's just suppose this is a commandlet, completely wrong syntax, but let's suppose it's a commandlet, can be used in this commandlet. And the output of this commandlet can be used in this. So this is what a pipeline is. So how we can use that, pretty cool, but before we're going to do that, we have to know some other stuff as well. Like, okay, we have a pipeline now. What are some interesting manipulation utilities? We can compare stuff, we can group stuff, we can measure stuff and all that. But also we can format and transform the output. And actually, just not to bore you too much, I'm going to show you. So I'm going to show you the getNav server instance again. Now, who did like this output? Sure as hell, I didn't. This is not cool. So what we can do is pipe this into a next commandlet, which is, okay, I have an output here, but formatted it, oh, that is not good. Format it as, for instance, a table. That's already actually still not readable because, yeah, all the dots, right? So let me see what I can do about that. We have an auto size parameter here, which I'm not able to type. This is cooler, but now everything falls off at the end, right? So I can have other stuff like, okay, I'm not going to output in my console, I'm going to output it as a file, as the grid view. Now I'm getting in a window. How cool is that? Now I can see everything. I can even filter on display name and say, okay, everything with 80, or another 80. I can filter, I can sort and all that. So I can help myself in watching what things get back. But also, this is just formatting and a manipulation. Maybe I want to put this into another nav command, like getNav tenant of company is also okay. So I'm getting the output of all the server instances, putting that back into another command, being the nav company. So what do I expect? That the nav company will be executed for every instance that I'm sending to that getNav company. So now I'm getting back all the companies from all my single tenant environments. Why is that? Because it doesn't know of any tenants. Cool, let me solve that. I can also say, okay, give me all the tenants. Now, okay, let me back a list. This is not nice. I can just format it. Format as a table again, which I know I want to auto size probably. Again, I see actually just too much columns. So then I've got my manipulation, which is, okay, only select the column ID and, for instance, the server instance. And pipe this again into the format table. And now I made a mistake. So now only getting those columns, right? And I can keep on doing this, right? So actually I wanted to get all the NAV companies. And with a simple command, you can see that I get all my companies, of all my tenants, of all my server instances, with actually just a single line. Pipelining is nice. So, you'll give an applause for block commenting and not for piping. This is something that I don't understand. So, now that we know this, we get started with PowerShell. Now we can start with scripting. But before we start scripting, we need to know some other stuff, right? We need to know how to work with variables. In fact, it's very easy. Variables always start with a $sign. And I can put anything in it. That means also an object. That also means a collection of objects. Anything. You'll see that later, and that will be quite clear. We can work with operators, obviously. This already starts to look like C-side, right? We can work with constructs, if stuff. This already looks like C-side. And we can even work with for loops. And for each loop, this is already better than C-side. And we have obviously also our switches. And when we want to create something that is reusable, something that we will be using in multiple scripts, it makes sense to create a function of it, right? So we can recreate functions. And if you want to create even a commandlet, that is also possible. So in this case, I will just show that with an example. Now, when we start scripting, obviously, we are going to the scripting environment. So I'm starting the PowerShell ISE. I will close this down so you see more. And let's go to the basics. First, as I said, if you want to work with NAV commandlets, you have to load them into your run space. So that's what I did. As you can see, I can select a line, press F8, and I'm only going to execute that line. If I press F5, it's going to execute the entire script. Keep that in mind. Sometimes you mispress and stuff happens. So assigning of an object, we're not going to lose too much time of this. I can assign, in fact, anything. I can assign integers, strings, but also, let's just do this. But also I can assign, for instance, I have a variable IT knowledge, and I assign the content. I'm using some kind of commandlet for that, and I assign the content of some kind of text file, and I want to put that into the variable, the content. Cool, let's do that. And now I can just show that IT knowledge. You see that also my IntelliSense is aware of all the variables that I have. And apparently IT knowledge has got the shelf life of bananas, which is also the reason why we all attend conferences, right? Then, for instance, our get nav server instance, which I want to filter on all the nav server instances, I put that into a variable, and now I've got that variable available to show my server instances. As you see, now my variable gives back what I got back from that commandlet. We can have arrays, and the arrays can even be very complex, like the normal arrays that you just put values into and you reference it from just an ID, the first and the second. You can even give that ID some kind of meaning. Like the ID name has got the value Waldo, the ID email has got the value my email, which can be very useful because it can be addressed as even being a property of some kind of object or being some kind of loose coupled thing, like this. So if we do this, you see that I'm getting back Waldo and 2 times my email from this one and from this one. But this gives quite some opportunities. So now I have some operators. Now, the assignment operator, the equal, when you're using text, you can either use double quotes or single quotes. It doesn't actually matter. Only when you're using double quotes, you're able to use variables in your string, right? This is very useful. So if we, for instance, do this, both, the difference is that my text is the right one, Waldo rocks. And then text 2 has got actually just a $name rocks, right? So the double and single quote is different. And what do you think? There is a text in my text, and I multiply it by 3. It's going to give an error. No, this is just. So I'm starting really to like this. Here we go. So I can also use the minus EQ, and this is something you have to get used to. There is EQ being equal, there is NQ being not equal, there is GT being greater than, there is LT being less than. So this is something you have to get used to. Even when you start using this, and it has to be case sensitive or not case sensitive. CEQ means is it equal and case sensitive. IEQ means is equal and don't care about the case. So there are something to get used to. So my text is obviously false, but now I'm also do some manipulation. So I can have my text and replace Waldo with PowerShell. Now that's what we wanted to see, PowerShell rocks, right? And you can make it a little bit more complicated, saying, okay, replace Waldo with PowerShell, And now let's see if that output is equal in an unintelligent or case insensitive way. And let me check that. Obviously that's true, right? So you can do some stuff with that. Now for my constructs, I can, for instance, create an array with blue, green, black, and white. I can for each them. Now the for each is the loop that we will be using most of the time in PowerShell, right? I created my server instances way back in my script. I can even loop them and just, provide you a display name. When creating functions, something like this. For instance, for the add function, and I just can call the add like this, like I provide 10 for the x, and it's going to give me back 60. It's no hocus pocus, but I can use it also like this, because I can have some strings like that, and then it's just not going to interpret that as this. Now, when it really starts to get interesting is if I want to create some kind of commandlets. And then you have a typical behavior. Like, I can pipeline into commandlets, right? So that commandlet can either get back one object, or get multiple objects. What do I want to do once? What do I want to do for all those objects? And that's what you define with the begin, process, and end. So let me just load this function and just do it without any input. Obviously, it's going to just write starting, once processing. I'm not getting any input, so it's just processing here. And there's one ending. If I do it like this, like get me all the server instances and put that into my function, what happens then? It's still going to do that begin once. This is typically the place where you initialize your variables, right? Then it's going to execute the process for all the times, for all the inputs that you get, and notice that this reserved variable has got the object that you put into your function. So if you expect a certain object, you can straight away work with the dollar input, which is kind of nice. And it's going to, at the end, just do the ending once. This is typically the place where you return what you want to return with your commandlet. If I do, for instance, this, I'm putting something else in, actually a tenant object, into the test demo. And it's processing more, and you see that the input is different as well, is actually the tenant object itself. So, now we know all we need to know to start scripts, right? When you start scripting, I want to advise you, I want to encourage you to look at the scripts that also is provided by Microsoft. I get a lot of knowledge out of that. They are written quite nice. There is a lot of tips and tricks in it. Also, for instance, when you start uploading your first, or start provisioning your first multi-tenancy environment hooked up with your Office 365 and all that, I strongly advise you to use those commandlets. It will save you loads of time. We will not be browsing through them, it's just a recommendation. There's already the last part, which is, in my opinion, the most interesting one. The PowerShell in practice. I don't have slides for that. I'm just going to show you a few scripts, and hopefully they are interesting enough. So, I created a folder for that, being some scripts. And the first script that I would like to show you is copy a company. Who has got some classic experience in the classic client? And copying companies was actually just exporting a FBK file, renaming it, importing the FBK file, which was cool, right? And the fact that an FBK file was gone, who liked that? Okay. Now we have PowerShell, and we can actually automate that kind of thing. Like, For instance, I have a script here. Obviously, I'm going to load my module again into my run space. I have an original company. I want to rename it or copy it to the NAV TechDays2014. Now, just to be sure, let me see what I have in the server instance. Which one is it? Dynamics. That's 0. And I only have 2 companies. So the idea is to copy this company, I think the Chrome is Belgium, yeah, and copy it to NAV TechDays2014. Now this is something that I got out of the scripts as well, of Microsoft. That's working with the PS script root, which is again a variable that is always the root of your script. So if you want to refer to that root, it's kind of easy because that's always there, Now, also the joint path is quite of a nice one, because when you want to create your own path, it's always the backslash that you have to worry about. Is it there, is it not there? If it's not there, I have to put it there, or something like that. The joint path will help you with that. So then I'm starting. Okay, let me just show you first what the situation is now, just to get the NAV company. Then export the NAV data, which is a commandlet that is going to produce my FBK file, which is now called NAV data file. Then I'm going to rename the company. I'm going to import that FBK NAV data file, and I'm going to show the situation again. And to conclude, if the NAV data file still exists, I'm going to remove that. So let me try to execute this. If I'm quick enough, which is usually not the case, you'll see still the NAV data file. Here it is. Now it's restoring that NAV data file. That's also why I tend to like to work with the right host kind of thing. Then I can always see where my script is at that moment. So we're restoring the backup now, and this is now my situation. I have a new, and my my backup file is gone now as well. I hope you think now, Waldo, you're stupid. I never thought I would say that in front of a few hundred people actually, but because we actually do have a commandlet for that. We have a copy nav command. We could have done this in just one single line, right? So I could have just, let me just remove that. As you can see, I can also execute commanded lines. And do this. It's going to do exactly. It's going to do exactly the same, right? Just copy one to the other. I really like this one as well. So, how cool was that? Now maybe a second script. This one is to search for a company. Like I've got my environment. There are multiple server instances. One is the multi-tenancy. The other is not multi-tenancy. I don't know anymore which is multi-tenancy, but there are companies. And I would like to know what company or search for a company that is on my environment. Now for this, obviously, I need an input. But I don't want to write a function for this. I want to do it just another way, just to show you. So this is a way to let the script ask you for an input variable, and then the script can continue with that input variable. I'm loading my module, obviously, again. Then I'm initializing my array, because I'm going to put all the companies that I'm getting back and I'm finding in my system. I'm going to put that in that array. And first, I'm getting all my tenants. I'm going to loop them. So here you see, get all my tenants, and one by one, I'm putting them into this variable, and at that time, I have only one tenant. And with that tenant, I'm piping that into the getNav company. So I'm getting all companies for that certain tenant, and I'm going to filter that to my search company, the one that I got back from my input parameter, right? Then I've got all that search companies in that tenant, and I want to put these into that array. But I want to use the special array. Like, I want to put lots of information in there, being the server instance, the tenant, and the company. Now, at the end, so I'm creating a new object for that, and I'm putting that into the array. And at the end, I'm just giving back the information, and I'm formatting it like I want to format it. So let me do that, and let's find our BR, which should give me back the Brooks as well. And indeed, there is the Brummel NV and the Brooks that I just created. Right? This seems to be in T2015 MT, and in this tenant, let me see if I can find something else like Microsoft. Yes, indeed, there is also Microsoft in the Microsoft tenant. How cool is that? Not cool enough. Third, I got lots of server instances. We are a development partner, and as a development partner, you tend to have more than one customer. I hope you have more than one customer. That means you need to have some kind of infrastructure that facilitates multiple service tiers, multiple databases, things like that. By default, Microsoft does not support port sharing. I do say, and this is only for me, this is not a big disclaimer, port sharing works. And we use it internally. We have, I think, about 100 service tiers running on one server without any problem, running all on one port. We do not do that on the customer side, just because Microsoft does not support it. Microsoft recommends not to use port sharing, but use different ports. But then we always do some environment, more than one environment. We have a live environment, test environment, staging environment, training environment, whatever. We have multiple environments at the customer side as well. And we don't want to use port sharing there. So it might be useful to have a script that says, okay, get me all the port numbers for all the stuff that is here installed here. And this is actually just, again, kind of like the same that you have seen. Like, I get just all my server instances and I loop them. I'm again constructing some kind of object, putting that into an array, and returning that array. Now, obviously, I'm using here the getNav server configuration because my port numbers are in the configuration file, right? And I'm reading the configuration key. And if it's the management services port, then put that in the array and so on. Yeah? Maybe it's now cool to use. I don't know if this is going to work. It is. So, it gives me back just a list of the server instances. And you see, some of them are shared, and some of them are not. Like this one is not shared. Why is there shared? In fact, I didn't set up a web service instance for this. And if you don't do that, the port is default. So that's why it's actually shared, because it's not running. Right. All the scripts that you see here, I will be putting on my blog, just to get more views on my blog. Next one is, I don't know if you noticed. Let me show you again, and this is really cool, at least in my opinion. If I do the getNav server instance, getNav tenant, what you see here is an object that is useful. Like, I have the server instance. Cool, a tenant always has a server instance, right? And I have a tenant ID. Cool, a tenant always has a tenant ID. But when I go a little bit farther and I say nav company, you see that I get back only a company name. In my opinion, that's not enough. So I can just take a look at the get member. I hope you remember the get member. Remember the get member. And you see that the object contains only one property, being the company name. Where is my server instance? A company always resides on a server instance. Where is my tenant? A company always resides on a tenant. And if it's on a single tenant environment, then even the company is part of a tenant, being the default tenant, right? So this, in my opinion, is not a good object. So what I have tried to do is, and this time I'm getting a function because I tend to use this quite a lot, a function being the getNavCompany2. And I'm going to try to use this as a commandlet. So what I'm doing here is I say, okay, bind it as the commandlet. Then you get all the nice stuff that the commandlet can do. Like if there is an error, just don't show it. If there's a warning, don't show it. Things like that. So that's cool. Then I'm providing the parameters that I want to see and use. The naming of the parameter is quite important because these are the parameters that are going to be used to pipe into a next. Yeah? Oh no. These are the parameters that are used for when something gets piped into, like the output of the NAV tenant, for instance. Then I've got my beginning part. Oh, also see this property. Parameter, in fact, it's, the parameter says, okay, you can receive the value of, sorry, that's too slow, of the output that is named the same. So if I get the output of the getNav tenant, if it is named server instance, get that as an input for this server, for this commandlet. Then I'm going to begin. It's going just to initialize. And then I'm going to create actually just a new object. So I'm obviously going to use the getNavCompany because that's actually going to give me the companies, but I'm going to create a richer object containing the server instance, and again the name is important, and the tenant, and again the name is important because this is going to be used for an input in another commandlet maybe. And yeah, obviously I'm going to, at the end, just provide a tenant, and I have my objects there. To show you this, I have to load this in my run space, F5. I could have shown you it this way as well. Like, okay, this is my wrong output, right? Which I only have one column, and I cannot use this as an input of a next. For instance, invoking a code unit in that company, and you see that everything fails. A line like this should work, in my opinion. So what I do here, and now you can see how to load a script from another file into your run space in runtime. Just put a dot on in front, and it's going to load that. I already did, but I'm still going. You see that I'm using now the NAVCompany2, my new script, and I'm going to invoke that code unit. And you can see that it actually did that. So it executed the code unit, which is messaging just a message, and that message contains executing code unit 50,000 in company, and then the company name and tenant ID default. So you see that default also works, and you also see that I didn't import my code unit in all my environments. So obviously when it doesn't find the code unit, it's going to give back an error. And what you do when you give a demo like this, you just say, okay, error action is silently continue. And just execute it. Oh. don't see. Sorry? I'm doing it wrong. Sorry. Now there's no error. So that's good for a demo. Actually, the last one, I wanted to show you this. I can use this just because I put that command line binding. This one in front of my script being, okay, mask this as being a commandlet and give me all the advantages of the commandlet. This is one of the advantages that you have. Let me look at the time. We have loads of time. So, I just talked with someone just before my session, and she said, I hate Powershell. If I want to do something, I need buttons. So I had to create a script. I only want to work with buttons. And I actually did this in a few minutes, going to my OneNote, copy the entire script and put it in here. We are able to use a .NET framework, and as you can see here, I'm using the system Windows Forms button and all that to create some kind of window. And what it does, I'm just going to show you. You can even do something like this. I created this on the fly, and it's going to show me a Windows form where I can do something. Now this is going to insert my user, the current user, into a database, a NAV database that is available on my system. I'm not going to execute it, just it is quite messy actually. I just wanted to prove a point. It's going to insert straight into the NAV instances. Again, it's going to be available, but you can even please someone that only wants to work with buttons, right? Now, the next thing, who did already see something about the merge commandlets? So quite a few, you already know how to work. This session is not how to work with the commandlets. I actually want to point out, it's not how to work with the merge commandlets only. I just want to point out a few things to take into account when you start with those merge commandlets. We are all developers, or a lot of us are developers, so the merge commandlets or the rapid start upgrade code, they actually make sense for us. But there are things to take into account. Let me see this environment. I have some scripts. I have a merge folder. Okay, that doesn't contain anything. I'll look at it like this. Let me just open the main merge script, which is actually my main merge script. And I'll go like this. There is a merge. And I have 3 files. The first thing you see, and you should maybe remark, is, dude, you could have created this with the commandlet. Yes, I could. But, and here's my first challenge. When upgrading, you're upgrading from one version to another, right? Okay. So at the current environment, we are doing that from 2013 to 2015, right? The export and the import does not work in 2013. So at this moment, the export and the import, obviously the import we only need in 2015, so that is okay, but the export is not that useful just yet. But from 2015, I expect that it will be able to use. And why is that? A few more parameters are added to the fin SQL, and those parameters do not exist in 2013, and that's why the commandlet fails. When you create your text files, so your modified, your original, and the target, make sure that you do that you create the right versions, but also the right objects. Make sure that you create the same object set, and you only have missed the object that you didn't have, or didn't exist in the previous or next version, and all that. The object set needs to be the same, else the merge tools are going to decide the wrong things, like, okay, this object was deleted. No, I just didn't export it, right? So that is the first thing. This is a manual thing, and I always do that manually at this moment. So what I did is I created an original, and this is real life. This is our product. Just want to stress that. I cannot prove it, obviously, but this is real life. So I exported just the RTM version of 2015. I exported the version 2015 in cumulative update 1. So that was actually just released last week, I think. And our product. The same objects. Now my main merge should be able to run. This is my main merge script. I'm just pointing, and again I'm using the script root here. I'm pointing to these text files, the original, modified, and the target. I provide a little bit more information, and we can continue. As you can see here, I have some stuff that I do and don't do. So the script is going to do lots of things. It's going to split files, create deltas, then merge versions. It's going to update the version list. It's going to update the date time. Then create filtered result folder, which is kind of interesting for us. We need to be able to filter the object designer to the objects that we actually have merged, because we need that set to check out in our version system. That's it. I just created a function for that, so that it provides me the filter that I can copy to my object designer. And then, if there were conflicts, it's going to open Araxis merge for me and show me the conflict. Now, obviously, the script is going on here. This is a work of 5 minutes. No, it isn't. This is actually a work that has started from the first version of the commandlets back in, I think, in February. I've been involved in the beta program, and that's why it's already this big. I will put this on my blog as well. Let me just execute it. So what I'm going to do is going to execute or create a merged result folder in this one, right? Execute it. So I'm not going to split the files. It would take us too long. I'm not going to create the deltas. It would take us too long. And I'm not going to create a filtered result folder, because in this case, I have only a set of the changed object. I have the cumulative update 1. I have the same objects of the RTM version. So all of them are changed. So filtering them, like I only want the changed one and not the identical ones, that wouldn't make sense. If you do a complete export of all the environments, it would work as well. But then the output would be 5,000 files. And from the 5,000 files, there were maybe 100 files that were actually changed. Now I only exported 142, else it would take just too long. And again, this is only a tablet. So you have seen it opened Araxis for me, the merge tool. So it seems to have one conflict. So let me see, there is a result folder. That result folder contains 147 items, including the conflict files, and my Araxis is just going to compare these 3 folders. Let me just close this. Next tip I would like to give you is when we are merging, As you see, I just use the compare NAV application object to create the deltas. I'm using the split commandlet to split the files. And in this one, I'm going to merge the versions. And I'm using, obviously, the merge NAV application object for that, right? But I'm putting the output into a variable, because that variable is quite interesting. I can do stuff with that. Suppose that I'm comparing 5,000 files, and I changed 100 of them. It's going to merge 100 files, right? The output is going to be 5,000. And which were merged and which were not, you can have from that merge result. So in that variable, that contains, the information which object had which result. Was it a conflict? Was it merged? Was it identical? And all that. You can do stuff with this, like updating the version list, right? Who doesn't care about the version list? Does not, so Mark Brummel does not care about the version list. Okay. I do care about the version list. And vision of Microsoft, and I understand that vision, they cannot solve your issues with the version list because it is really company bound. You have to solve it. And they have provide us a way to change the version list. So that is good. So what I have here is the commandlet for updating the version list. And you can see here that I'm actually using the merged result, so that output that I got, right? And I'm filtering that on everything that was merged and had a conflict. Why conflict? You have to merge them as well, and I already want my version list in place. Then, for each of these objects, I'm going to set the NAV application object property, which is, again, a default commandlet that we get. And I'm going to do something here. I'm going to set the version list to something I get back from my own function. This function I already blogged about. You might not have read it. It's already on the blog. But it's quite a neat function. It is neat because I didn't write it myself. This is actually provided as far as I know by Microsoft. And this is kind of a neat way to work with arrays, actually. So they created an array and split the version list of the original one with commas. And they do the same with the modified, and the same with the target. So they put the entire version list of all the versions in one array. And now we can do stuff. Now we can filter them, sort them, and select the highest one. This is really, really cool. Never would have thought of that myself. The only thing that I changed is Microsoft works with, and it's not provided, it's just in their PowerPoint. They are using the merged result itself, which makes sense, but it's difficult to test. If you want to test that, you usually don't have a merged result object. So what I did is I changed it to different parameters, and now I'm able to just change to provide my own version list. So this is just an example of a version list, how it could be in the original one. This is NAVW171. It's going to be in the target 80, so W1. At the top, I'm using prefixes, so I want to merge, take the highest one of the W1, take the highest one of the Belgian version, NAVBE, and take the highest one of I, being my product, right? And the rest, what it finds, is going to just put at the end, which are sometimes issue numbers, work items numbers, or whatever, right? So it's kind of nice. The output is my merged. I've got 80, NAVBE 80, my new version of the of my product, and all the issues that I wanted to put at the end. Again, this is on the blog. You can download it. It's useful. Someone in the workshop even said, like, there's a tear coming down my face now. So that's good. Not my face, but his face. Okay. The other thing, as I said, you don't always have a merge result, and sometimes you want one. And it is nice to just save it. So you can save the object in some kind of object XML to be able to later get back into your object and work with another script on that. If I close my run space, all my variables are gone, and also my merge result. And this merge result is something that you sometimes want to keep. Last tip, one of the last tips. Opening an access merge is just a goodie. It's nice to show you, like, hey, you can open stuff. But sometimes you just want to run stuff from the command line, and this is actually the way to do it. It might take you sometimes to figure out how many of these quotes you need and how many of this. It took me quite a while, actually, before this worked. But it works. Next challenge. When you're done merging, right, you have to import your objects. And then I don't know who has got a lot of merge experience, but there are always two problems. One problem is the control IDs. Yeah, okay, I'm glad someone acknowledges. The other problem is when Microsoft adds a field, we are not able to import it because of the licensing issues. Yes? Nobody? No? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Well, I can tell you these problems are not solved. Yeah, it's still something that you have to keep in mind. Yes, we have been talking a lot on the control ID part, and I'm going to show you this. So this is the import. I'm just going to give you some time to read this message. Now this is when you're importing lots of text files into a database. So I'm going to just say yes, mess up my database. Now it's importing. Now I just did this merge, so I'm reading out of the result. I'm reading all my text files into my database. Now during that merge, there was a conflict on the control IDs, and I have a function 100 that is used by Microsoft and by me, and that is my mistake because I didn't think of the offset. And I'm just going to show you to make sure that you know and that you remember and that you keep on remembering this and you slap in your face that you didn't remember this. Right. This property here in the older database, you have to set, and this is only my recommendation, you have to set for every database. You have to think about it for every database that you set up. If it is my recommendation, if it is a production or a product database for your ISV solution, put your number range in there. Number range being your number ID. If it is a customer database, put 50,000 in there. Because by default, it's 0. And guess what Microsoft uses? 0. So by default, this is giving you headaches. We forgot to set these settings, and we began re-implementing our product in the beginning of 2013. We forgot to set this setting for 2 weeks. We are now almost 2015. We are still having problems with the functions that we created in the first 2 weeks, just because of this. And now we are upgrading all the time and upgrading, in fact, almost every cumulative update. And the merge tools are really cool for that. But the control IDs are giving us headaches every time that we merge. This, what I just show, is a real live example. Again, for the cumulative update one, we have the control ID problem. And yeah, what I don't like this output actually because it doesn't say in which object the problem is. But I advise you to use the log path. If If you don't have a log, and you don't have a way to see which object the fault was. But it's going to put, the object like this in the log, and here is my problem. Like, okay, the ID is used by get sales setup, and a function. I use functions like this to start like, okay, from here on are my functions for the product, and both of them are using the same ID. This is going to give you headaches, and please think of that. The other one is going to give you headaches is the fact that Microsoft adds fields. And apparently we must have a license to add fields. As a partner, I always thought I have license to add fields, right? No, apparently fields have IDs, and some IDs you cannot use. Come on. Now there is a way to avoid this in some way. There are always two ways to merge. I can merge the changes of Microsoft into my solution. Or I can merge my solution into the new database of Microsoft, right? If I do the first, I change the changes of Microsoft in my solution. Most probably, I'm going to have that headache. And it's still the same. I just prepared a few objects here. Why do I keep on closing this? So I have the original one, which, is just a payment terms table. It modified by Microsoft, which has a new field number 7. Are you kidding me? Which is obviously a Boolean. I translated a little bit. And the ISV, which we did it obviously the right way, 50,000. And when I execute this, yes, you may import it. You still have that same problem. Okay. Being, sorry for this. It is not, you don't have the right program license to do this. To create the "are you kidding me" field. Obviously, the right way to do this is put the 50,000 one in Microsoft database. But sometimes your changes were a lot more than only that small cumulative update, and it would not make sense to put all my changes in the Microsoft database. It would more sense like small changes into my database. But then again, you might run into this. The way to solve this is use an object, use a FOB file, import that into your environment in a merge kind of way, not replace, but a merge, and then you're able to override it with your text file. Okay, this was actually. So, next one, the GUI. I have 10 minutes, so it would make sense. The GUI. What I would like to show you is a way to run PowerShell in NAV. This is going to be on the blog as well. So no need to write to picture this. Because it's going to be quite fast, I guess. We have created, I'm not saying I, because actually we have one very smart developer who is really good in .NET. Antwerp is really good in .NET, and he has come up with a way that I just couldn't help. I needed to share this. What he did is he created a PowerShell wrapper. In a way, he's using .NET framework, the .NET PowerShell session of the standard stuff to open a run space in NAV, close a run space in NAV, add commands, execute them, things like that. Next, when I'm executing PowerShell, then I'm getting back stuff, right? I'm getting back objects. Now, to handle these objects in NAV is not that easy. I don't know what I'm going to get back. I don't know how it's going to be. I cannot prepare a table for that, right? I don't know which fields or how it would look like. So we're working again with .NET Interop object collection. So a second code unit is being created that manages this. And that code unit is going to mask a record. You will be able to use it as a record. So there are a few functions that are extra in that, define first, count next, things like that. So you will be able to just run it like that. Next code unit is to be able to work with the properties. The things that I'm getting back, I want to give, like, hey, I want this property, and I want that property, or I want all property, or whatever. Or I want to get information about all the properties that I want to do. I think it's more interesting that I show you the code, right? Right?
Give it to us.
Yeah, you will get it. I'm always already here. So I got my wrapper, my collection, and my stuff. And in the wrapper, I'm just using the Powershell .NET Antwerp kind of thing. I will not go into detail because you just you get the object. So there is a possibility to open the run space. And when my run space is open, there is a possibility to load modules. So I'm able to load my NAV module, right? And then there is a possibility to add comments, like get NAV server tier, right? There is even a possibility to add scripts. So if I'm not wanting to be bound to one comment, I can add an entire script. If I do use comments, I can add parameters, either with a value or not. And obviously, I can invoke. And this is where I think the magic starts, because this expects that code unit. So I just can invoke and say, okay, here's my code unit, put everything in there, so I can use that code unit to go over my object collection. One thing here is the begin invoke. Begin invoke seems to be an asynchronous process, which you don't want. Well, it does work, and it's the only one that works. The invoke does not work. For some reason or another, I don't know the details of it, but it didn't work, so you need to use the begin invoke. The end invoke is going to wait for your process to stop anyway, so you can use it asynchronously as well. Then, the magic one is this code unit. This code unit just has a function that receives, like here is my object collection, here is everything that you get back, do with it as you like. And then we have created some functions like the reset, the count, is empty, next, find first, set position, stuff that we might need as, to browse the object collection, right? I'd like to think this as being a design pattern. And then there had to be some magic as well, because the properties, I was told, were implemented in .NET like predicates, and predicates are not unusable at all in C-side, or so I was told. So if I only even use this in any way, in a variant or in any way, C-side says, no way. And I need this, obviously, for getting all my properties out. What are the names of my properties? Because I need them. So what we did is another design pattern that is not really orthodox, and some people don't really like it. I'm still going to show you. Now, to get your way around things is write a DLL for it and use the NAV, right? So if NAV doesn't support it, I write a DLL it and I just use .NET Interop in NAV to use it. I don't want to use DLLs too much because that gives some deployment issues. I always have to foresee the DLL, and if I forget to update or things like that, always trouble, right? Right? Oh, come on, guys are sleeping. So what I'm doing is I just write the C# code in NAV. I'm compiling it in memory. So I have the DLL in memory, and I'm using, I always say I, but actually that's the developer. And I'm using reflection to get to the two functions that I created in the class. So you see that I'm using here reflection to use the get property, using reflection to use the get properties, and those are the two functions here. You might want to debate, yeah, it is a good way to do or not. Let's not do that. This is a way to do it. This is a way to do it completely in CIL without needing any DLL. Actually, you're using a DLL, but because it is so small, this is the entire class, and I'm using here a link to do that stuff that I want to do in C#, and that is actually going to do stuff. Now, to show you an example, this is how we use it. We open the run space, which is my wrapper, right? We put a command on it and some parameters. We invoke it, and this is where we add the code unit. You see here that it is a code unit. I'm getting back that code unit. This is where you would have put your record, right? So you just say, okay, if find first, then repeat until next is smaller than 1. So you use it really as a record, and you're getting back your properties. And afterwards, you close the run space again, and that's it. I have only 4 minutes, so I'm going to do this example, the GetNav company example, which is actually the pipeline example. Pipelining can be done this way, just add a comment, add a comment, add a comment, and it's going to pipeline it anyway. Or I can also do it like this, but then I'm not adding a comment, but I'm adding a script, right? This gives some flexibility, so let me just try to execute this. Yes. Just going to give the messages of all my companies. And that was Brummel as well. All my companies in all my service tenants, in all my NAV instances. What we built on top of this is as well some kind of matrix, so to run any kind of PowerShell commandlet in NAV. And the biggest problem here was creating the matrix actually. Get NAV server instance. Oh, I cannot use tab here. I can say start, and it's going to build me the output in NAV. Thank you. Also a nice one here is I can load a script into it. Do I have a script to load into it? Maybe this one. No, yeah, you cannot see it, but you see that there is an entire script into this one to get the NAV port numbers, and that's possible as well. So, oh, I have a few more scripts. Okay. What we actually, can you use this in a production environment? We are using it in a production environment. The reason that I've been blogging quite slow the latest few months is the fact that we have been really busy in implementing our mother company. Our mother company has got 200 and, let's say, what was it, 26 subsidiary companies. eFactor is one of it. And we decided to implement them completely multi-tenant. So every company is now a tenant. How to manage that, it's not simple. And we decided to do that in NAV. So that's also why we got really deep into how to do the other PowerShell in NAV as well. So basically what we are doing, we have some kind of client. I'm using now the tablet client here. Then there is our basics for running the PowerShell in NAV. And what it does, it runs PowerShell for SQL to create a database. It does mount the tenant. It's going to sync the tenant, so my database is there in place. Going to create a company, and that's it. And that is how we provision now for that customer. To show you this is somewhere here, the provisioning app. This is just a piece out of that. So for instance, we have our tenants here. I can create, for instance, a new one, being the new favorite place of Luc, maybe, Wauters. So now we have this one, and I can start the provisioning. Now what it does in the background is the creating database, is syncing it, or mounting it, syncing it, foresee everything that is to be foreseen on a multi-tenant installation, and let's wait until it is provisioned. These were provisioned today, and I'm very happy to see that finally we have Wauters as a subsidiary as well. And we can, for instance, start the NAV client, or the Windows client in this case, and do that. I really like this URL. Anyway, here's Wauters. Okay. So yes, you can use it in VR Live, and like, I'm a native NAV developer. I really like to keep things in NAV, also the provision part. This is something that pays off because multiple developers now can maintain that application, to maintain that stuff. So this is actually all I wanted to show you. I am 25 seconds over time. Sorry for that. I do have some tips, being this one. This is really useful. I receive, in fact, every day a mail, which, let's say, 80% of the time is interesting. Also for NAV, just how to use PowerShell, some tips and tricks. Usually also, because PowerShell is using in the administration world a lot, that doesn't really have to do too much with NAV, but how to work with variables, arrays, objects, things like that. Every day you get a tip. One of the tips, for instance, is also how to use PowerShell and YouTube and stuff. So what I actually created is a PowerShell commandlet to how to get to the how-to videos on YouTube. So this is a way to use PowerShell in PowerPoint. So it's going to execute and, okay, give you a list of YouTube videos, and there are some like, okay, I want to look at a video on how to do PowerShell on YouTube. So now I'm 1 minute over time. Are there any questions? There are t-shirts, so yes.
For instance, the import commandlets to import objects in the, in the database, you've shown it, and also with you, you evoked it, of course, an error with that field that you couldn't add.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a possibility to also have that script run silent if in case of an error, that it goes on and afterwards shows all the errors?
I suppose it can. Typically those are created as being a commandlet, and it can use that. I can try to test it. There is the error action, there is a warning action, and you can use that to just like silently continue, and then it goes on.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Next one. Okay.
Hi. Some of the PowerShell commandlets demands that you run them with administer rights.
Mm-hmm.
And with your example, do you need to start a developer client with administer rights to run those type of commandlets, or is?
As a developer and you're doing development things and you're going to use the merge commandlets, I would advise you not to do it as a administrator. Just because the output that you do, like the text files, you might want to solve your conflicts in text, and if you do that, then you need administrative privileges as well, because the owner of the file is.
No, I was thinking about the example when you execute PowerShell scripts from NAV. It's you need to start the client with administrator rights, just in order to run the commandlets that demands administrator rights. Or
Yes. I've got the wrong environment for that because I am an administrator on the entire machine, so it will work all the time in my environment. But when you're not, you need the administrative privileges to do the administrative stuff, like adding a new user or delete all users or kill them, or not kill them, but you know what I mean.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, he needs t-shirt as well.
Hi, Waldo. Actually, what I want to know that.
Whoa. Okay.
Sorry. Last week we got the data migration tool from Microsoft so that we can migrate 2009 to 2015 straight away now, yeah?
Yes, you saw that.
Yeah. So can we use this merge tool now for 2009 as well, so that just we can.
You can use the merge tool, yes.
For the straight
Yes, you cannot use export or import, but you can use the merge tool.
Merge tool, yeah, to do that.
And
one more thing.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. You said we should not. Microsoft says don't use port sharing.
To use?
Do not use port sharing.
Yes.
Is there any particular reason that why we should not use port?
The reason, what I heard, was performance.
Okay, performance.
But I say again, and this is just with a big disclaimer, we do it with 100 NSDs and without any problems.
Yeah, even
and we don't have the issues. No.
There's another question here.
Yeah.
Hi. We're having doing the translation because our country doesn't have Microsoft translation or localization. We're from Serbia. And one thing I want to ask for a test nav application object language, we're getting output that doesn't show all the missing translations. We have tried all type of formatting the output of the test nav application object language, but we didn't manage. We just get an info that in one object there are maybe 4 caption missing and then 3 dots at the end.
Okay.
Are they?
I must apologize for that because I haven't been playing with the language commandlets too much, so I cannot answer that in any way. What I would expect is that you need at least a caption before it knows that you're actually looking for a translation as well.
It found missing translations, but when you have more than 4 missing captions or field captions for multi-language that we're doing the test, you just get 3 dots at the end. You get 4 controls that are missing caption, and then 3 dots, and you cannot get anywhere. You don't have just find functionality that you can paste in translation text.
Let me test that. I cannot answer that. No. But you got the t-shirt.
Hello. My question is regarding a versionless merge.
Yes.
In some cases, let's say your solution is based on 2013 R2, let's say last cumulative update, and you are migrating your solution to 2015, and some of objects should be downgraded because of Microsoft have not included. So that script you showed, it takes the highest version.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't work.
You will have to change the script, but I guess that's. I think there is a possibility to do that.
I saw this case should be maybe a problem there.
So this was the last t-shirt. and we are massively over time. So if you do have questions, please come down, and or we can take it offline. Thank you for attending the session, and see you next time.